and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Los Angeles sees days of unrest after protests against immigration raids. Israel seizes a Gaza-bound aid boat carrying activists, including Greta Thunberg. And nothing can stop Cristiano Ronaldo as a 40-year-old wins the National League with Portugal and plans to stay at Saudi Arabian side Al Nassr. Los Angeles is witnessing another day of chaos as anti-immigration protests erupt across the city. Clashes broke out downtown after ICE raids swept through the area, part of President Trump's push for what he calls the biggest deportation operation in US history. With over a third of LA's population born outside the country, the city has become a major target. As protests escalated, Trump deployed hundreds of National Guard troops and warned protesters, "You spit, we hit." Take a listen.
We're going to be watching it very closely. And when they spit at people, you know, they spit. That's their new thing. They spit, and worse, you know what they throw at them, right? And when that happens, I have a little statement. They say, "They spit, we hit." And I told them, nobody's going to spit on our police officers. Nobody's going to spit on our military, which they do as a common thing. They get up to them this far away and then they start spitting in their face. That happens, they get hit very hard.
Earlier, I spoke to British press photographer Nick Stern, who was caught up in the riots. Here's exactly what he told me.
I've had pretty major surgery on my leg. There was a projectile that was 3 inches long by over an inch diameter, hard plastic that was embedded in my leg muscle. I'm hooked up to a vacuum pump that's draining fluid from the wound. I've got IV in my arm. This will be going on for at least a day or two. They're concerned about infection setting in. So I can't walk at the moment. I barely have stepped out of bed and can't do so without support. So I don't know how long I'm going to be here for, and equally how long I'm going to be immobile for, but it's pretty frustrating. I do have a physical therapy session today, which I'm really not looking forward to, but I think it's going to be a gradual return to mobility.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by Dubai 92 presenter Jono and former editor-in-chief and also media strategist Michael Jabri-Pickett. Michael, we'll speak to you first regarding what we've been seeing unfolding in LA. Obviously, I just spoke to the British photographer Nick, who was there on the scene, injured during those riots happened. A horrific ordeal, really, Michael, to endure while you're just trying to do your job. And he's not the only press member who, has suffered.
Yeah, there was an Australian journalist who was on camera, and that's when she was hit in the leg as well. It is, I think, something that we've become immune to be quite honest. In the 600 days or so of fighting in Gaza, we've had more than 180 journalists killed. Since 1990, we've had almost 2,700 journalists killed around the world. And these are men and women who are, as you said, doing their job. They put themselves in the line of fire. And I think because we live in this social media world, we're used to seeing action, either video or pictures. And I don't know that we necessarily appreciate that there are men and women who are putting themselves in the line of fire to get those pictures. We just automatically assume that there are cameras everywhere. But sometimes those cameras are being held by men and women who are putting themselves in harm's way.
And essentially, Jono, just to try to get the truth across, that's a lot of the time what the journalists,
of course,
at the coalface
effectively innocent bystanders, but we now obviously we can speak to the journalists, but there will be other people who have also been injured who are innocent bystanders in this situation. People are being hurt, and this is the concern. Likely we're going to see more riots as well, and I think that it's only a matter of hours before we'll find out if that's true or not. There's been 300 National Guard who've been called up for this currently, so we know that this has been an escalation quite quickly. There's 500 Marines on standby. I mean, that is a show of force. 500 Marines and 300 National Guard with a further 1,600 on standby should this continue to escalate again, which we'll know in the next couple of hours if it does. Obviously, people are angry with regards to the immigration process, and these are lawful ICE operations which are being targeted currently, and it seems that the anger is palpable with the population right now. But innocent bystanders are who are suffering here, and companies and people's livelihoods are what is suffering at the root cause of this, which is a concern.
Because we've obviously seen the images today, and it's the aftermath. It's the burning cars. We've seen smashed in properties, and it's always the ramifications that come after that. But Donald Trump has been speaking within the last couple of hours, the first time he's commented on what's been going on in LA, and he said LA would have been completely obliterated without the National Guard. So he was saying it was a necessity. But Michael, what I wanted to know, is the state versus federal?
So the first thing I would say is when the president spoke about they spit, we hit, I would want to actually add a caveat to that, which is there have been no reports that anybody spit on any law enforcement officials. So I think that that's Donald Trump using what he would like to see happen as an opportunity to get a certain message out there. But to your question, I do think that it's quite interesting that I'm 58, soon to be 59. The last time a president sent in troops, National Guards, the National Guard, into a state when the governor did not want it was before I was born. It was 1965, it was Lyndon Johnson, it was to Alabama, and it was to protect civil rights demonstrators. It's not something that happens. During Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana, there were 7,000 National Guards who were sent, but that was in conjunction with, in coordination with, the governor. Here, you have the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, and you have the mayor of LA both saying, we did not need the National Guard. And yet Donald Trump, I believe, is using this because I think when he was president during Trump 1.0, George Floyd was killed, and the Black Lives Matters protests were going on. And I think that there is a desire on his part not to let things get to that point again.
I think you would run the risk if he'd not sent in the troops. We would have been in a different situation because troops went in from Friday night through to Saturday is when we saw the troops first arrive and the deployment. Had that not happened, we would be in a different situation now with probably maybe more casualties and more fatalities. Yes, it is probably a ploy whereby Newsom and Trump have gone head-to-head many, many times, and this is a further loggerheads in that particular debacle between both of them. Had the troops not been sent in, do you not think we'd be in a different situation today?
I don't, not that I was there, of course, but speaking to the mayor of LA when she was being spoken to by journalists, she should have no skin in the game, right? Democrat, Republican, she should be caring about what's happening to her city. She felt that there was no need for the National Guard to be sent in. The governor might have, because he is such a Democrat and he could be running for president on the Democratic side of things. He and, as you said, Donald Trump have butted heads over the years. But you would think that the mayor would probably want what's best for her city, and she felt that there wasn't the need.
I just felt with projectiles being launched into the crowd, with ransacking, with autonomous vehicles being burnt out, at what point do you say enough is enough? And yes, it would be extraordinary circumstances. Yes, now Gavin Newsom and also the mayor of LA have decided that they would like to countersue for this action being taken. But hardly a repeat of what we saw in the Capitol when the Trump riots took place would be something that was required. And I don't know what level we would have had to get to in order to call in the National Guard and to have Marines on standby, because currently the civil unrest seems like that we haven't seen something of this level in years.
But I would also say that the National Guard are not there to de-escalate. That's not what they're trained to do, and that's not their area of expertise. They're there for a show of force. And I think that any of us who have traveled to America, any of us who have watched any news programs for any length of time coming out of the States, we recognize that there is something within the American nature where they're not going to back down just because there is a show of force.
But it's quite interesting, we're just talking about this time, because the photographer I was speaking to earlier who was injured from his hospital bed, he said to me he had covered George Floyd. He had been at those protests and at those riots when they were happening, and he did say he felt these latest ones were far more inflammatory than he had seen before. I did ask him that question, and he was reporting from the ground.
And I think, again, I don't recall a scene at this level of what seems like anarchy from an outside point of view looking in. And obviously we're seeing some of the more dramatic footage. But LAPD have been told they may use whatever force necessary to bring this under control. That was not working or has not worked so far, and the riots continue yet again. And as we said, the ransacking, the looting, everything that goes with it. This is anarchy, is what we're seeing currently. And if you're trying to make the argument that the immigration policy and procedure is not correct, this is hardly the way to do it. This is definitely not the protest that is going to bring that about, and it's certainly not going to stop down the Trump administration's policy on what they're calling the largest deportation of any US history of our time. So I think that this is the wrong way to go about it. I don't know if this is going to achieve anything aside from create absolute consternation within the public.
But it is such a divisive issue. And although 70 million people voted for Donald Trump, there's about 350 million Americans. So there are a lot who didn't. And I think that there is a large segment of the population that would use this as an opportunity to protest what it is that they see as something that either shouldn't be a priority or they see as illegal. And some of the people that the administration has deported, you can argue quite easily, they have gone against what the Supreme Court has said and what other lower courts have said, that this is not the way that you go about moving people outside the country.
And once again, the Republican Party will say, we'll vote it in on a mandate and we can carry this out. But as you said, very divisive issue and something I'm sure we haven't heard the end of. But thanks so much for your thoughts on that. Stay right there as we just move on to another story. Now, Israeli forces have seized a yacht carrying activists and humanitarian aid that was trying to reach the Gaza Strip. Climate activist Greta Thunberg and a French lawmaker are among 12 people on board the Madleen. The activists say they are protesting Israel's ongoing war in Gaza. Their lawyers claim the seizure violates international law, a claim Israel does deny. Here's what Greta Thunberg told her followers.
Greta Thunberg and I am from Sweden. If you see this video, we have been intercepted and kidnapped in international waters by the Israeli occupational forces or forces that support Israel. I urge all my friends, family and comrades to put pressure on the Swedish government to release me and the others as soon as possible.
Earlier, I spoke to General Yaakov Amidoro, former National Security Advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister, for his thoughts, as well as former Turkish Ambassador Cengiz Ferhat. Here's what they both had to tell me.
We are very sorry about the fact that civilians had been killed by Hamas' decision to fight within civilians. We think it's a sin, it's against the international law, and we are more than angry that Hamas is fighting within his own civilian people. We know that at the end of the day, the international community is not something that Israel should be dependent on. They didn't think that we have to attack Hezbollah in Lebanon, and we did it with great success. They didn't think that we had to go to Rafah, and without it, Yahya Sinwar and his brother probably were alive now. So with all due respect to the international community, the responsibility for the security of Israel is not in the hands of foreign leaders, it's in the hands of the Israeli government.
Nobody believes that Israel has any international law on its side in all of the atrocities genocide is committing in Gaza at the moment. It's as simple as that. Unfortunately, over 1 million, maybe 2 million people are suffering. They're starving to death. And this little boat was a signal to the international community that, yes, we should do more, and more international pressure should be put on Israel.
Two completely different sides there that we just heard. But what do we actually know, Jono, about the people on the boat, and basically where are they now?
So 11, I'm going to call them civilians, but one journalist on board as well, so making up 12 in total. Greta Thunberg, as we mentioned. Rima Hassan is there as well. She's the French-Palestinian member of the European Parliament who's on board. And then there's a couple of other representatives who are there as well. Where are they now? Well, we believe that they've been taken to Israel and they'll be detained there briefly, is what the message has been. Then they'll be deported to their home countries. And now, Israel's defense minister has also said that they are going to make them watch footage from the October 7th Hamas attacks so that they can see what took place for themselves, saying that this is a blockade that's in place because it is a security necessity, and you need to be aware about why this is in place. The sea blockade, at least, has been there for a number of years before the land blockade was ever in place. So this is not news, and should not have been news to the flotilla either, who were made fully aware in advance of setting off on what effectively was a dead-end mission, that they would not be granted permission to get past. And as soon as they entered past international waters and started to get close to the Gaza coastline, that they would have been intercepted, which is exactly what happened. They had been warned, they had been told that this would be the case, and they ignored all of those advices. And although the message overall may appear to be somewhat of a legitimate one, which is that we need to get aid into Gaza, it was always a futile mission, carrying just under a truckload of aid to try and get across, where the Israel forces would have intercepted them immediately.
And like you said, they basically said that. And Michael, Israel has branded this boat a selfie yacht. Do you think this was just some massive publicity stunt?
100%. But as we've talked about before in this show, when people are desperate, it calls for desperate measures. And we certainly don't want what happened last week in Colorado. But if you're a peaceful protester and you want to demonstrate that you disagree with what's happening in Gaza, you want to stand up for the people in Gaza and in the West Bank, what options do you have? You need to do something. If you are driven so much to respond to what you see constantly on social media, you have to get out there and be heard and be seen. And was it a publicity stunt? Yes, but I don't see that people who care have much option other than publicity stunts, because the international community continues to allow Israel to do whatever it is that Israel's going to do in Gaza.
The aid still will get through to Gaza. We know that. They've said that the aid will be delivered, and I believe as the boat made its way to Ashdod, to the city, that the aid would make its way further afield. We can hope that that aid will then make its way through, but we're fully aware for the last number of weeks and even going into months at this stage, aid has not been making it through the land border with Gaza, which is, of course, devastating news. And I do see the worth in perhaps trying to bring attention to that, but I don't think anyone's unaware of that at this stage. I feel like this is exactly what Michael said. It's a publicity stunt. Calling it the selfie yacht was exactly the correct way to refer to this. And I don't see what these particular people brought to the party to bring attention to it.
I would say, but we're talking about it.
Yeah.
So they've done something.
If we were not talking about that, we'd still be talking about Gaza today and saying that the aid was not getting through. There may have been other stories of the Gaza blockade, and also the aid making its way through, which didn't make it to those who needed it today, would have still made it to the media.
And I respect that opinion, but I also think that it allows us to then talk about Gaza in a different way that might get some people more engaged, because it's something that they can relate to, instead of yet another day where more Palestinians are killed by more shooting from the IDF.
And that's what I hope it does. I hope it brings it to the human psyche. I hope people say, right, how are we going to now get involved? And I really hope that it's not 12 people who feather their own nest on a boat to head to Gaza to try and bring attention to something.
So I think that there are better ways for these 12 people, if they wanted to stand up and make a point that would shine a brighter light on themselves. I think that there are better ways to do that. I think that, and this is something that's happened, these flotillas, it's something that they've tried for decades to get into Gaza. So they knew it would fail, and they knew it would probably fail in international waters as this one did. But again, when you can't get in through land, you can't get in through air, this is the only other option. And it does shine a light on what they consider the most pressing issue of the day.
And I must say something, since 2007, there's been the blockades when it comes to the sea into Gaza, which they were trying to get through. And now 4 months we've had the land blockade. So it is really like a fortress. And I think maybe a lot of us, Jono, had forgotten all the way back in 2007 that had happened.
Yeah.
So it's like that conversation again, like how do people actually physically able to help those
exactly,
right
and
now.
that's again, like Michael said,
Yeah.
if that becomes the crux of this, and we eventually end up getting aid through there, and we have a flood of aid into Gaza as a result of this publicity, amazing. Greta Thunberg doing any favors by saying she was kidnapped when she was told in advance, you're not going to get past here, please don't even attempt it, is a different narrative.
But I would, sorry to interrupt, I would also say that if they're going to make the 12 watch what happened on October 7th, then I would say that there should be a sizable part of the Israeli population that has to watch home videos from the past 80 years, starting with the Nakba, and so that they can see exactly what it is that they took away from so many Palestinians.
The same won't be done, but that's...
Yes, it wouldn't be done. But I also thought what was quite interesting is, you know, we talked about Greta saying it was a kidnap. And we've actually heard from Sweden, obviously, where she comes from, and they've rejected her plea for help, which I thought was quite interesting. And the Swedish Foreign Affairs Minister said on Monday that she believes Greta Thunberg is not in need of support from the ministry after the climate activist called on followers to pressure the government into action. She also basically doubled down on the fact that as a result of Greta's plea, the consular hotline had received a high volume of calls meant for Swedes in need. They weren't getting that. So actually, they're saying it was quite a dangerous campaign, and it's had ramifications, especially for Sweden itself.
And let's be very clear, she's not in any need of any assistance. She is going to be deported. Once they've watched the video, she will be deported, as will all 12 of the people who are on board, the 11 activists and the 1 journalist. They will all be sent back to their home countries. They're not in any immediate danger right now, and they have not been kidnapped. They've been intercepted, and they were told that that would happen.
Yeah, very interesting thoughts. Thank you so much for that. And we're going to move on to another story now. And Russia's President Vladimir Putin has approved a major revamp of the country's navy, according to a Kremlin aide. Russia currently has the world's 3rd most powerful navy after China and the United States. The announcement comes after Moscow launched what Ukrainian sources described as the largest overnight bombardment of the war, firing nearly 500 drones and missiles just across Ukraine. Earlier, I talked to former presidential advisor to both Boris Yeltsin and Vladimir Putin, Professor Sergei Karanov. I started by asking him how about NATO Chief Mark Rutte's latest comments on President Putin.
Mr. Rasmussen is the head of a criminal alliance which have committed several aggressions during the last 2 decades. So I even do not want to comment on his words. Second, it is absolutely well known that Russia have been calling on NATO for 25 years, people including myself, but also officials, not to expand, or otherwise they would have been met with the repercussions. Our patience have been overexhausted. Unfortunately, we reacted too late. We don't need land. Now we have more than enough. But we want to stop their cancer, which is called NATO. And we want to stop the cancer, which is called European expansion, which for the last couple of 100 years, or even more, have caused numerous hardship for the world. 2 world wars, totalitarian ideologies, massive genocides all over the world, capitalism, racism, everything has been there and coming from there. We want to stop Europe from imposing its way of life on the world. If there is an opening with the United States, I mean, which is a relatively healthy more morally and spiritually and culturally member of the Western clique, we want to use this opening. We do not want the expansion of hostilities or else a deterioration them into the World War III. I have been calling for preemptive strikes on Europe, first on nuclear, if necessary, hopefully, God forbids, nuclear. Europeans are, because European elites have lost everything and they are absolute failures, so they are longing to cover up their failures with total animosity, or even again, in a little bit more than 100 years, they are pushing the world towards the new world war. We have to stop them. Trump is withdrawing from this mess, but unfortunately, Europeans have lost their minds. They are running amok. So I hope, of course, that we should never be close to using nuclear weapons against Europe, but they should know that if we are pushed to the necessity, we'll have to do that to save the world from this European monster, which have unleashed already 2 world wars and is driving the world towards the 3rd one.
Now, Cristiano Ronaldo has said he'll continue playing for Saudi's Al Nassr next season, despite speculation of leaving the club. The 40-year-old striker was part of the Portuguese side who defeated Spain in the Nations League last night. Ronaldo scored his 138th goal for his country, making him the oldest player to score in the tournament. Earlier, I asked Saudi Pro League presenter and commentator Joe Morrison about the player's legacy and what keeps him going.
He's got that aura. He's like Michael Jordan with the Bulls. He's a marquee name. He's a huge figure, and there's no doubt he had an impact. There's a lot more nutrition, science, rehab now for players in comparison to going back to the 80s or even the 70s. So I think you're getting more longevity out of players now physically.
Yeah.
The difference is motivation. When you've got 250 million followers on social media, when you've got, 6 cars in the garage and a ride-on lawnmower, what more does a guy need? It's the motivation where you have to give him respect, not the physical, like still wanting to compete for silverware at 40 years old.
So he's got a lawnmower, apparently, which is quite interesting, Michael, but still winning trophies at a grand old age of 40, imagine. And there seems to be no stopping Ronaldo, really.
So I would wonder a little bit about what he said. Yes, there's motivation, but I think the reality is that for a lot of athletes, as they know the end is near, and at 40 you know the end is near, that there is a fair bit of fear about what's next. So maybe my best bet is to prolong what it is that I'm doing right now. And I think that a lot of athletes, we know this, they struggle once they retire. Some will be either going to school or they'll be doing media training in the off season so that they do have something to fall back on. But if it's something that you've been doing since you were 7, 8 years old, and it's all you've really known as you've gotten older, and then for those incredibly lucrative and peak years, your 20s and 30s, once that goes away, for a lot of men and women, they don't know how to make that adjustment. And I think sometimes in this particular case, the motivation might not be that he's wanting to be the best. It might be, maybe I'm scared about what's on the other side.
I don't know. I know what you're trying to say, but I think Ronaldo's a whole different ballgame because he's got all the money in the world. I'm sure he's got academies. His son's a really upcoming footballer. There's stuff going on in his life, if you want to put it that way, and he never really has to work again. And I'm sure he could commentate, on whatever he wanted. So I do think it is the passion. But anyway, moving on. Jono, they all say 40's old, blah, blah, blah. How long do you think
Look, I think
he can go on for.
no. I think 40 is the new 20, maybe 30 at a push. But it's at now he's not the oldest player who'll have taken part in a World Cup. If he keeps going for 2 more years, he'll be inside the top 4. But he won't be the oldest. An Egyptian player in 2018 was 45 years old competing in the World Cup. There's a 43-year-old Colombian who took part in 2015. Peter Shilton in 1990 was 40 years old when he was in the World Cup. So yes, it will place him inside the top 4. And like Michael said, maybe he doesn't know what is next because this is not a money situation. He's worth $800 million US. He makes
that it?
that's all, but he makes $700,000 a day. So every day that goes by, he's got another close to $1 million in the bank. So I don't know if it's going to be necessarily about money, and I think he's lucrative for the rest of his life. He's lucrative for his kids' life and his grandkids' life. He's got countless endorsements that are on board with Ronaldo as well. And just the name itself is the CR7 brand will be eternal and will live on. If he goes into a line of, and he does the Kardashian move and he goes down the line of fragrances, he'll still make money well into his 80s or 90s. But I do think the kind of athlete that he is, he wants to keep going. He has a passion for the game, and he's got a passion to stay in sports. If he didn't, he'd do what David Beckham did, and he'd just go consult.
I was just going to say I'm going to double down on my argument, and I'm going to use David Beckham as an example. When you look at his situation, what we see as spectators watching his life unfold, David Beckham's, I think that there are a lot of people who are wondering that he's a little bit, yes, he does some wonderful charitable work, and he's got great family time, but it's not the same. And I think that there is a real fear on the part of a lot of athletes, again, as they get closer to the end, when they start to question what's next. And maybe, as you said, it is the passion because of the love of the game. But sometimes it's also the passion for the love of the game because there's nothing else that I've had time to figure out what I love.
So I was just wondering, I quite like David Beckham when he's cooking. I must say those shows are always quite nice. That can be watched. He's passionate.
But Ronaldo's not going to go there. He's not going to do a cookery TV show next, or I don't know what it is, but it's not.
It's not a Ronaldo thing.
That's not a Ronaldo thing.
But also, controversially, football is a team sport. Ronaldo is 40. Is it easier? Because if we look at the likes of tennis players, Novak Djokovic, 38, nearly 39. He just lost in the French Open semi-final to Yannick Sinner. He's desperate to get that 25th Grand Slam. He'll be the best ever. But he's struggling. He's had injury. It's a one-man sport. You're out there with no backup. Is it easier to be in your 40s, you think, and you've got a team sport?
I think the expectation is... because of who he is and the reputation, I think there's so much more pressure. I also think that if it gets to the point where he's 42 and he's on the club for the World Cup in 2026, if he's not pulling his weight, the amount of hate from the media that he'll get, so he'll be the first to recognize I am the age I am, and I play ice hockey with a lot of people who are half my age. I know when and I'm not anywhere near that level, but I know when I am not having a good game. And so I think Cristiano is going to know exactly the same way, that it's not working out. And that may be one of the things that motivates him right now, is that I want to prove that I am as good now and I will be as good at 42 as I was when I was 22. I
would argue that go out on a high. If you're Cristiano Ronaldo and you're thinking, right, I'm about to hit 40, would now be the time to retire. But again, he is the GOAT. And you said, yes, it's a team sport. Please name another player from the Portuguese national team. I really can't. And you find that across the board. The player is almost superseded, as a person, has superseded the sport in itself. He is something that transcends. And Michael and I, neither of us are football fans. Yet we know intrinsical details about Cristiano Ronaldo or David Beckham's life because they are bigger than the sport is.
I would also say, and maybe you can't appreciate this, but one of the things that professional athletes from sports where there are teams, one of the things they talk about missing the most is the dressing room after they retire, where they get to hang out with all the other guys. And that, I think, is not as prevalent in the individual sports. But I think it is something that if he is truly part of the community, when he plays with these teams. That may be something else that motivates him, that he doesn't want to lose.
But it's interesting because even in the individual sports, the dressing room's really important because you've got coaches, you've got physios, you've got other players, you know, you've got friends who you hit with. But it's such an interesting conversation. And let's see what his next move is. Cristiano Ronaldo there. And finally, Jono and Michael, you've come up with a couple of quirky stories of the day. And Jono, I must say I love your story because it's about a zebra who was on the loose. We did mention this last week, but he's been rescued. What a lovely story.
Yeah, it's nice, although the video footage is somewhat concerning. A pet zebra has finally been captured after he escaped spending a week-long manhunt, zebra hunt, I guess, if it's a zebra, across Tennessee. The very dramatic video footage was of the moment initially that we saw of Ed the zebra being airlifted now by a helicopter, wrapped in a net, rocking side to here he is, which looks...
He looks so happy, doesn't
well,
he?
I don't know, as happy as a zebra that's been airlifted through could possibly be.
Yeah.
Ed is now at his new home in Christiana as well, which is nice, but he was spotted galloping along the intersection in some very shocking footage, and people were concerned, and he became an internet sensation and a meme after his 8-dare adventure, which led to viral videos of Ed pretty much everywhere. But now he's safe and he's back at home once again.
I'm glad that Ed's safe. I love the fact that he's called Ed. And I must say that zebras have always been one of my most favourite animals, and I always called them donkeys in pyjamas. That's
great.
what they look like.
A little bit. And
A little bit.
I mentioned this earlier on, but a great collective noun as well. I love a good collective noun.
Oh, yes, yes.
And a good collective noun for zebras is it is a dazzle of zebras, which I think is tremendous.
Oh,
Can
but
I-
he's just on his own.
Can I also say that it's actually zebras?
Zebras.
Never.
This is
Never.
tomatoes.
No.
And we're now with a Canadian talking about pronunciation and an Irish guy. I think neither of us are overqualified to give you that.
And obviously, but I've always said zebra. To me, it's zebra. Zebra, zebra.
It really depends.
Donkey in pyjamas. We can settle on that one.
Safe.
Donkey in pajamas.
Yeah, donkey
Fine,
in
we'll go with
pyjamas.
that.
But we're glad that Ed, human name, back safe and sound. Good luck to you, Ed. And Michael, a UK restaurant deliberately designed to provide bad customer service is actually closing its doors. Should we be surprised by this?
We should be disappointed by this. And the reason is because this would be, as someone who used to be a server, a waiter, this would have been back in the 80s, I would have given all the tips during the course of a busy weekend so that I could react the way that some of the staff at this restaurant/theater production house were encouraged to act with their customers. Rude hand gestures, curse words, swearing at the customers, throwing menus at them. It's called Karen's Diner for a reason, because all of the staff treat the customers as though they're Karens. And they finally are given their just desserts, pardon the pun, and the staff are able to treat them as though they can take out all their frustration on these customers.
What is a Karen?
A Karen
Who is a Karen?
Michael had a really perfect description
Yeah,
for it.
yeah.
But it is a lady of a certain age, I think,
Someone born in the
who was
70s.
born in the 70s, who has got a specific type of haircut, which indicates
You said
that
it was a bob, and I have a bob.
That's why he didn't want to say it again.
but who has got a predisposition to want to complain about pretty much everything.
Oh, yeah.
Who constantly asks for the manager.
Yes, yes.
That's my mum. I'm just
Yeah.
putting it out there. You know, as soon as you pay a bill at the restaurant, she always says, "Where's the manager? I could have made this better at home."
I wish I could have gone to a restaurant like this, but I think it's quirky, it's kitsch. I get the idea behind it, and I always judge somebody by how they treat a server in a restaurant. And I think it's nice to give people who are normally the complainers a taste of their own medicine. And this sounds like it was a taste of their own medicine by 10. I'd seen some of the videos online.
But there's going to be some pop-ups, Jono, so
Oh, good.
not all hope is lost. Am I right?
Yes,
Yeah.
there will be some pop-ups. And I think it for a server, I think it could be incredibly cathartic, where you're given this opportunity to let out years of frustration. You know, when you've had some of the world's worst customers. Because as I think the two trickiest jobs are being a journalist and being a server. Because if you're a server, you are juggling 5 or 6 different tables. You could have 2 people at one table, you could have 6 at another. You have to give one person, one table their check, you have to collect an order for another one. You have to be able to walk up to a table for the first time and gauge within nanoseconds the energy. Is this a first date or is this a last date? And because you're able to sort of, if you're successful, you're able to read the room, you are constantly on guard. And when you do encounter customers who are not polite, who do not treat you with respect, you really don't have any recourse. But here, Karen's Diner is the place where all of those servers could go because, as I said, they can do pretty much anything they want and say that it's part of theater.
I imagine it's tricky to get a job anywhere else afterwards because that's on your CV, that's the last place you worked. You're not going to walk into the Ritz and say, my customer service is impeccable. But what I wouldn't give to be able to go in and freely and openly tell everyone what I think about them on a day-to-day basis without having to go to HR would be, I'd be a delight.
I must say, I also worked as a waitress back in my 20s in London, and I was just always really nice for the tips, like I wanted the money. You know, I think that's a lot of the time why our people
with the same haircut or with a different haircut?
I've always had the Karen Bob. Is that okay?
It's fine. It's fine. When you're on the receiving end of it, I'm sure it's fine.
You look a bit shocked, Jono.
I'm taken aback by it, I gotta be honest with you. And I also can't imagine you in the service industry. I just feel like I reckon you had to act a lot in order to be able to be overly pleasant to the customers.
I'd like to say that I'm very nice. On that note, thanks to today's guests, Dubai 92 presenter Jono Hayes and former editor-in-chief and media strategist Michael Jabri-Pickett. And that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on X. GNT with Tom Burgess Watson is coming up next. Goodbye and thank you.